Hi and welcome to Film 3.uk Movie Recap. Today, we will be reviewing the movie Lawrence of Arabia, 1962, so if you're a fan of the film or just curious about it, stick around. In our video reviews, we may include some spoilers, so please be careful if you haven't seen the movie yet. In the first part of Lawrence of Arabia, the film opens with a map of the Middle East and then shows the British military HQ in Cairo, Egypt. We are then introduced to Colonel T.E. Lawrence, played by Peter O'Toole, who is working as an intelligence officer in Cairo. We see a flashback of Lawrence's time as an archaeologist in Syria where he discovered an ancient tomb. We also see a flashback of when Lawrence was a student at Oxford University. The scene then shifts to the present day where we see Lawrence working at the military HQ in Cairo. We also see a brief scene of Lawrence's friend, Mr. Dryden, played by Alec Guinness, who is the director of military intelligence in Cairo. The scene then shifted to the desert where Lawrence is leading a military expedition to find the lost city of Petra in Jordan. Along the way, Lawrence and his men are attacked by Arab tribesmen. Lawrence is able to negotiate a truce with the Arabs and is later made an honorary Arabian prince. The scene then shifts back to Cairo where we see Lawrence meeting with Mr. Dryden. Dryden tells Lawrence that he has been chosen to lead a mission to help the Arabs revolt against the Turks. The scene then ended with Lawrence riding off into the desert on his camel. In the second part of the film, Lawrence arrives in Cairo and meets with General Allenby. He is then assigned to negotiate with the Arabs in the Hejaz region in order to secure their help in fighting the Turks. Lawrence travels to the Arabian desert and meets with the Arab leader, Prince Faisal. He convinces the Arabs to fight against the Turks and leads them in a successful attack on the Turkish-held city of Aqaba. The film Lawrence of Arabia, 1962, is divided into 10 parts. The third part of the film is entitled The Hejaz Railway. In this part of the film, Sharif Ali bin Nusayr and his Arab followers derail a Hejaz train carrying Turkish soldiers. This victory is short-lived, as the Turks quickly retaliate by bombing the Arabs' camp. In the midst of the confusion and chaos, Lawrence manages to rescue a young boy who has been separated from his mother. The fourth part of the film Lawrence of Arabia, 1962, begins with Lawrence and his men attacking a Turkish train carrying ammunition. The attack is successful and the Turks are forced to retreat. Lawrence then leads his men to the city of Aqaba where they attack the Turkish garrison. The garrison is easily defeated and the city is captured. Part 5, Lawrence and his men are on the move again, this time heading deeper into the desert. They come across a group of Bedouin tribesmen and Lawrence begins to negotiate with them, hoping to persuade them to join forces with him. The tribesmen are initially reluctant, but Lawrence is eventually able to convince them and they agree to join him. Lawrence and his men then continue on their journey, but they are soon beset by a sandstorm. They take shelter in a cave, but Lawrence is seriously injured when a boulder falls on him. His men manage to get him back to camp, where they tend to his wounds. As Lawrence recovers, he reflects on his life and his mission. He comes to the realization that he is not meant to be a leader, but merely a tool to be used by others. He decides to return to England, but not before he says goodbye to his men. In the sixth part of Lawrence of Arabia, Lawrence and his men travel to an oasis in the hopes of finding water. However, when they arrive, they find that the oasis is dry. Lawrence then arrives at a British camp, where he is met with disdain by the commanding officer. Lawrence then leaves the camp and sets off into the desert. As the film enters its seventh part, Lawrence has successfully united the various Arabian tribes under his leadership and is leading them into battle against the Turks. However, his successes have made him arrogant and he now believes himself to be invincible. This overconfidence leads to him making a foolish mistake which costs the lives of many of his men. Despite this setback, Lawrence rallies his troops and leads them to victory against the Turks. In the eighth part of the film, Lawrence and his Arab allies successfully capture the city of Aqaba from the Ottoman Turks. This victory is a significant turning point in the Arab revolt, and allows Lawrence and his allies to begin the push towards Damascus. Along the way, Lawrence encounters several challenges, including dealing with infighting among the Arabs, and an attack by a group of Bedouin raiders. However, he and his men ultimately make it to Damascus, where they are met by a large crowd of cheering Arabs. In the ninth part of the film Lawrence of Arabia, the title character, played by Peter O'Toole, and his friend Ali, played by Omar Sharif, are captured by the Turks. They are brought before the Turkish general, who demands to know where Lawrence's rebel army is located. When Lawrence refuses to answer, the general orders his men to torture Ali. Lawrence still refuses to talk, so the general has Ali brought back and has his eyelids cut off. Lawrence finally relents and tells the general where the rebel army is located. The film Lawrence of Arabia, 1962, is divided into 10 parts. The 10th part of the film is set in the present day, where Lawrence, Peter O'Toole, is shown living in seclusion in the English countryside. He is visited by an old friend, Colonel Brighton, Alec Guinness, who has come to ask him to return to the Middle East to help with the recent Arab revolt. Lawrence initially refuses, but after Brighton shows him a newspaper clipping about the death of Lawrence's old friend and mentor, Colonel Britain, Claude Rains, he changes his mind and decides to return to the Middle East. The film then switches to flashbacks of Lawrence's time in the Middle East, during the First World War. We see him leading the Arab troops against the Turks, and eventually winning a major victory at the Battle of Aqaba. However, Lawrence's plans to march on Damascus are thwarted by the arrival of General Allenby, Jack Hawkins, and his British troops. Allenby tells Lawrence that the war is over and that he is to return to England. Lawrence disagrees with Allenby's decision and believes that the Arabs should be allowed to fight for their own independence. He tries to persuade Allenby to change his mind, but when the general refuses, Lawrence resigns from the army and leaves with the Arabs. The film ends with Lawrence riding off into the desert on his camel.